Let the word go forth.
Fool me once.
Are you fired up?
I'm not a crook.
Are you ready to go?
Shame on you.
It's Abe Lincoln's Top Hat, hosted by Ben Kissel.
Fool me, can't get fooled again.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am your host, Ben Kissel, and this is the Dumpster Fire Chats. I want to thank everyone who shot some emails my way. I can only get to a couple of them this week, but they're all amazing, and I do read them, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. For the future, you can email me at benk721@gmail.com. All right, the first email comes in from Josh Moss, and the subject is prison reform or prison abolition. Prison reform or prison abolition. Josh writes, hey Ben, third email. Maybe this one is the charm in terms of you reading it on air. No big deal if not. Well, my friend, third time was the charm indeed. I know you're big on prison reform, and I've heard you liken it to slavery. I deeply agree that our current prison system is a continuation of antebellum slavery. My question for you is this. If prison equals slavery, shouldn't they be abolished, not reformed? It sounds extreme, but if prison equals slavery, how can there be any other right thing to do? Here is the wiki about the prison abolition movement to clear up any of the finer points. Maybe this is extreme for your centrist point of view, but you would have been for abolishing slavery, so it seems like an easy opinion to have to me. And of course, then he sent me a link to the prison abolition movement. The prison abolition movement is a movement that seeks to reduce or eliminate prisons and the prison system and replace them with more humane and effective systems. It is distinct from prison reform, which is the attempt to improve conditions inside prisons. However, relying on prisons less could improve their conditions by reducing overcrowding. Josh, thank you so much for the email, and you are absolutely correct. It is a subject near and dear to my heart. I firmly believe, I would have been behind bars in many, many ways for many things when I was a kid. We were terrible kids, running all around and doing God knows what. Nothing violent. We weren't a violent bunch, but a lot of people in prison aren't violent either. And I do believe it is modern day slavery. If you look at Angola prison, no doubt that was an extension of the plantation. Angola is nothing but a plantation, and we go into that on a regular basis. The United States, basically, the whole prison situation began in England, as many things do, with your English workhouse and things like that. And then the United States has seen sort of three different waves, three different major waves in regards to our prison system and in regards to, where we are today. The first one came in the Jacksonian era, which was kind of interesting. Of course, Andrew Jackson, the godfather, the grandfather, the creator of the Democratic Party. He was a slave owner. That's what people in the world might call a problematic fave. But Jackson, the Jacksonian era, it's also known as the second party system era because there was a long dominant party. It was the Democratic Republican Party. They became fractured in the early to mid 1820s. Jackson supporters began to form what has become the modern Democratic Party. Now his rivals were John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, of course, who had a foreign-born wife, and now we have another foreign-born First Lady in Melania. That is the second foreign-born First Lady. It was John Quincy Adams' wife and Melania Trump. So I'll tell you, that is, it doesn't happen all the time. John Quincy Adams created the National Republican Party, which later combined and joined forces with the Whig Party because they were both anti-Jackson. So that is the first wave of prisons started in this kind of Jackson era. And then, of course, second wave, it began after the Civil War. We have Reconstruction. Reconstruction, of course, being, figuring out how to live, after the most devastating war in American history, families fighting families. How do you be like, well, the whistle blew, the war is over. Now we're supposed to just unite. That was, of course, one part of Reconstruction, the political reconstruction of this nation, and then obviously figuring out what to do with the South. They were in shambles, and they needed government assistance and a lot of things like that. So that began after the Civil War. The second wave began after the Civil War and gained momentum during the Progressive era. This is your leaders of the Progressive Party, your Teddy Roosevelts, William Howard Taft, Woodrow Wilson. They began to do things that were interesting when it comes to prisons. They were the ones who put in this notion of parole, of probation, of indeterminate sentencing. So, they called it the progressive era, but it certainly wasn't progressive in terms of civil and human rights. This notion of parole, this idea that you have an extended sentence, this ever-looming cloud over your head. I mean, you look at recidivism rates, the reason they are as high as they are, and they are exceptionally high, is because of parole, the basic impossible standards that a lot of parolees have to live up to. They're not full citizens. They don't have the rights of full citizens, even after they serve 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. I am so for helping people reassimilate back into culture. These people who work in parole and probation, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you do work in that field, I'm sure there's some wonderful people who work in paroles as parole officers or as probation officers. But there's no denying these individuals have the state's interest in mind, not the people that they are watching over after they've been released from one of the more horrific situations anyone can be in, a U.S. federal prison. So the progressive era is actually why we have parole and probation, which I think is fairly interesting. And then, of course, we have what happened since then, since 1973. The number of imprisoned people in the United States has increased fivefold. In any given year, roughly 7 million people were under the supervision or control of correctional officers, of correctional services in the United States. I mean, 7 million people. We talk about the 2.5 million people who are currently imprisoned, and how that number is just absolutely insane. All the work that they do for free. Now, granted, of course, when you're in prison, those are rewards for people with good behavior, because that's how hellacious it is in there. If you get to work for free, at least you get out of your cell. It's just absolutely awful. And it all comes from the English, the people that came over here, the English that came over here. We had prisons pretty quickly. I mean, Christopher Columbus came over with individuals who were imprisoned on his ship. Granted, he didn't find the country that he thought he found, but nonetheless, as folklore tells it, he discovered America. The English were great. And creative when it came to their ways of imprisonment. They have this thing called the Bloody Code, and this was basically introducing hard labor, going back to what I was talking about regarding Angola's prison system, regarding what inmates at Angola have to go through. And, of course, the federal lawsuit that's happening now amongst a private prison. The majority of private prisons take in our illegal immigrants, and they are waking up at 5, and they're not going back to sleep until 9 p.m. 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., that's basically their work shift. Sweating, doing God knows what. And forced to do it, otherwise they will be punished. It is unbelievable. So to your point, Josh, I see where your movement is coming from, and I see the benefits of your movement when it comes to that, of course, of prison abolishment. In the 18th century English, that's when the English in the 18th century proposed solitary confinement as a way to rehabilitate inmates. And solitary confinement was created for moral reasons. These were the two reasons, the two primary purposes of solitary confinement was to isolate prison inmates from the moral contagion of other prisoners, a.k.a. friendship, I guess, to jumpstart their spiritual recovery. So it is to isolate people, inmates, from the moral contagion of other prisoners and to jumpstart their spiritual recovery, a.k.a. drive people completely and utterly insane. And now we are seeing this movement actually find policy. There are some politicians out there, specifically Bill de Blasio, and I say his name with respect in this regard because he has proposed to close Rikers Island. It's a pretty big deal, the idea of closing Rikers Island. You know, we were in San Francisco recently, and we didn't have a chance to tour Alcatraz. And, of course, a lot of people say, oh, it had to be shut down. It was so horrible. From my understanding of Rikers Island, it's worse. And I think it's absolutely atrocious that we still have these laws. I'm against bail. I think that bail is obviously predatory on the poor. It's an extra tax that you have to pay for your freedom. Wealthy people can pay it. Middle class people can pay it. Poor people, they might be able to pay it if they can scrounge around the funds. Many of them can't, and that's what we saw with this situation with that young man who ended up hanging himself after nearly 3 years in Rikers Island under constant abuse. This is New York City Mayor de Blasio voiced support on Monday for a plan to shutter Rikers Island in the next decade, but objected to a recommendation aimed at replacing the facility with jails in the city's 5 boroughs. And this is the issue. If they do close Rikers Island, where do you put these people? The 5 boroughs for New York, Queens, Brooklyn, the whole Manhattan. That's going to be tough for city councils to pass because they're going to be looking at their constituents in the eye and saying, we're bringing prisoners here. A lot of these people wrongfully convicted, sure. A lot of them in there for petty crimes that they just can't pay bail on, yes. And then you also have some people who need to be in prison because they are dangerous to society, and there's no denying that. But, of course, the upside is now you have family members closer. You don't have the distance, and you have a much greater sense of community effort in reforming these people's lives because at the end of the day, they will be on your streets, and they will be on your streets as soon as they are out of lockup. And so we want to have an institution where when they are on the streets, when their foot does hit the sidewalk pavement, they're ready and able to behave like functioning members of society. And the sad thing is a lot of these people go in as mildly functioning members of society. Some have done things wrong, obviously. Others are there falsely. And they come out hardened criminals. They come out maniacs. They come out, like Bane from Batman or, some, I'm going to say Bray Wyatt from the WWE. They're demonic because their minds have been so tortured. Much like Bray Wyatt tortured Randy Orton's mind at WrestleMania with the bugs. Anyway, de Blasio, speaking at an unrelated news conference on Randall's Island, said he believed the decade-long plan to close the scandal-ridden jail complex could be achieved with just a few locations that would be determined through a public vetting process involving the city council and relying on community input. A 148-page report released Sunday by the Independent Commission on New York City Criminal Justice and Incarceration Reform recommended an $11 billion plan to build jail facilities in each borough. De Blasio said, I do not agree with the commission's report on that matter. They're suggesting 5 new facilities. I don't think that makes sense because it would involve the expansion of facilities in Brooklyn and Manhattan and, of course, in Queens. The commission also recommended new facilities in the Bronx and in Staten Island. Again, this is going to be extremely difficult for them to do. And to your point, Josh, does it just spread the problem? Are we just dealing because yes, okay, we'll close Rikers. I have no problem with that. I think it is so tormented by the ghosts of its past. It is beyond. It needs to be a museum the exact same way that Alcatraz is. It needs to be a tourist destination. You imagine that if you were in Alcatraz, 1920, you're like, someday people are going to pay to come here. How crazy that would sound to them. This is a 27-member commission formed last year by City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito and led by former New York Chief Justice Jonathan Lippman. They've been arguing closing Rikers because the complex's mass incarceration model has done little to rehabilitate convicts and instead has fostered a culture of brutality and inhumane treatment of inmates, which is something that we absolutely know. The commission's year-long examination of the problem at Rikers laid the groundwork for de Blasio's announcement Friday that the city would seek to close the embattled correctional facility currently home to 7,000 inmates. So, this is it's beginning to have a little mainstream. We're getting some mainstream policies out there, or at least proposed policies. We'll see what de Blasio is going to be able to do with it. I'm not sure if he's going to be in office that much longer, quite frankly. He might be primaried. His poll numbers have always sort of hovered around the 40s. He never really has gotten a lot of political traction because of his feud with Governor Cuomo, a little bit inside baseball. They don't like each other very much, and Governor Cuomo wants to expand the power of the governorship in the state, as opposed to what happened with Michael Bloomberg, who basically acted as a much more powerful figurehead than the governor of New York State. But, to your point, if I'm going to sit here and equate prison with slavery, the idea of abolishing prisons, finding different ways to reform, rehabilitate, educate, and create better members of society, then we have to be for abolishing prisons. Of course, we have to have mental health facilities. We must get those back in. That's kind of the craziest thing with Hinckley, the man who shot Ronald Reagan. And I say Reagan, I know, okay, I'm sure I'll be mocked by somebody on Twitter. The fact that he did not go to prison is amazing, but also, wow. The man shot a sitting U.S. president, and they're like, yeah, dude, you're too bat crazy to go to prison. We're going to send you to home. And now I believe he's, to a hospital facility. And now he will be getting out soon, which is absolutely fascinating. But I think that that's where we have to get back to. This current era since 1973 is absolutely horrible. And we're seeing the fruits of the prison problem, the fruits of the prison system. They are bearing out right now, and those fruits are rotten. And it's decaying the moral fiber of our nation. The old cliche, 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prison population. So thank you so much for your email, Josh. I really appreciate that. And we'll stay on it, and this is big, especially here for what we're working on when it comes to running for our political office position, which we're going to hard launch on May 1st, which I'm very excited about. Just to get a message out and hopefully bring everyone to the left on this issue, because let's be honest, the left has been right about prison reform for a very long time, and we haven't had a lot of advocates for us. And I'm talking about the politicians that's proclaimed to be liberal. Please, as soon as they see that money, they definitely have a different opinion on private prisons, public prisons, as soon as they see that campaign cash. Well, thank you so much, Josh Moss. All right, the next email comes in from Brian Krauger. Thanks for writing in, Brian. Okay, the email writes, Mr. Kissel, I'm a big fan of Last Podcast on the Left, and of course, Abe Lincoln's Top Hat. I live in Quincy, Illinois, famous for being the destination of the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates. Oh, that was fun. Those were fun debates. Remember that? When the people had to you kind of had to be smart, and you had to debate somebody intellectually without moderators stopping in or commercial breaks from massive war corporations. What a time. The old Lincoln-Douglas debates. All right, let's see here. Brian writes, I work at a local college, and one of our famous alums is Larry Thompson, former Deputy Attorney General under George W. Bush. I was able to interview him and ask him about the writing of the Patriot Act, which he helped frame. When I asked about the expansion of power, i.e. drones and surveillance, he reminded me that if you get blown up, then your Fourth Amendment rights do you no good. Do you think this is a fair assessment of what the Patriot Act has led to? Thank you, and I hope you get a chance to read this, Brian. This is what's happening now as far as our Fourth Amendment rights. They are they're trashed. They're Snooki on the Jersey Shore. They are in a New Jersey bar dancing on a tabletop with its shirt off. The Fourth Amendment is trashed. It is gone. It is. I don't know if it's ever going to be able to come back. Although Snooki, to expand the analogy, did get sober and have a baby. So, yeah, I guess anything is possible. As I've always said, what happens overseas eventually comes home to roost. And we're definitely seeing that now with drones. There's police departments now because of the 1033 program. We talk about this ad nauseum, and I do apologize. I just feel like it needs to be closed. This program where we can give military equipment to local police precincts needs to stop and needs to end. That will also limit the military spending budget, which is just astronomical. It's huge and only expanding under Donald Trump because he wants to get more of a tangible footprint, if you will be, in the Middle East. That's what he wants to do. He wants more tangible troops. He wants more tangible military. He wants his toys for all intents and purposes. We have plenty of toys for him to play with, but like all rotten, spoiled children, he wants the new ones. He wants the 2017 tank, not the 2016 tank, which is literally it. The military boys and their toys. That is literally it. And that's why these police precincts are getting brand new military equipment, because they don't want the old toys. Because Bobby has the new toy, and if I don't get the new toy, then I'm not as cool as Bobby. Next thing you know, he's stealing your girl. Drones. They've been used in the military. This is an article in North Dakota. They are the first state where the police they're allowed to fly them. Drones have long been used in the military for commercial purposes and for personal use, yet rules surrounding registration and laws remain vague. American law enforcement is now integrating unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, into the police force. In North Dakota, a recent bill allows for non-lethal drone use on police drones. For example, this is the thing, non-lethal drone use. Oh, it's not just a camera on there. And what the hell is lethal? Is it chokehold lethal? Well, it certainly killed Eric Garner. This is non-lethal. This is what in North Dakota, this is what they're going to be able to put on drones. I had to talk about this on Red Eye, and the idiots on that panel were like, oh, it's no big deal. Non-lethal. That includes this. So a drone can be armed with. These are considered non-lethal. Tear gas, rubber bullets, which, by the way, you take one of those to the dome, and it'll tell you one thing that's extremely lethal, and pepper spray. Next thing you know, you're pepper spraying a whole crowd. One person's asthmatic. They're going to die. So these are lethal weapons, and I'm so sick of police be like, no, you know what? It's non-lethal drone weapons. Of course, it's going to be lethal to somebody. Good Lord. Now, reactions have been mixed and concerns are surfacing. Tech Republic spoke to Michael D. Rayton. He's the chief police for the West Fargo Police Department about how he sees the use of drones impacting law enforcement. I was born in Fargo. And by the way, there's more cows than people. There's 600,000 total people. In no way does that police force need a drone task force. No, what has happened in North Dakota? Are you kidding me? And you know for a fact that'll be going down to South Dakota very soon. And I already know they used it. They were using drones against the protesters of the Keystone Pipeline. Oh, my goodness. So North Dakota is the first state to legally allow drone use in the police. And now, how did this come about? To be allowed to do this is incorrect. The statute actually is restrictive. Prior to this, there were no restrictions on how law enforcement could use unmanned aerial systems in North Dakota other than rules set by the FAA. What Representative Becker in Bismarck wanted to do was highly restrict how law enforcement used drones in public. I don't buy it for a second. It essentially eliminated the possibility of law enforcement using a drone except when we had a warrant to use them. Paper stamp warrant, by the way. What do? You call a judge. Oh, you happen to know the judge. Hey, judge, we have a warrant for this person's arrest. Judge says why. You say why. Judge says, oh, okay, whatever. Who doesn't matter to me? That's it. I mean, it is so easy to get a warrant from a judge because these warrants and the prosecutor and the police, they're friends. If I ask Marcus Parks to give me permission to do something, odds are, regardless of how ridiculous it was, he'd be like, nah, whatever. Go do whatever you want to do. And, of course, what I mean is enter a competitive eating contest, and I am talking about ice cream, my friends. Ooh, if you could empty the soft serve ice cream of a Ponderosa. Ooh, my goodness. Don't even get me going on that. So it essentially eliminated the possibility of law enforcement using a drone except when they had a warrant to use them. That's certainly more restrictive than any form of technology that's available to law enforcement, including helicopters, pole-mounted cameras, the officer's personal observations. Even so, the intent of the law introduced by Representative Becker was to restrict law enforcement practices. I don't believe it one bit. What the North Dakota Police Association's aerial law enforcement officers and even some House and Senate representatives did was ask for amendments that were more reasonable than what was an accepted use of unmanned aerial systems. North Dakota, it's going to end up looking like Pakistan. So the rules are, they're guidelines of the FAA and other court cases that restrict how law enforcement conducts surveillance or the plain view conditions. If something is deemed in plain view, we're in legal position to observe whatever it is taking place. Through the course of these negotiations, one of the things that Representative Becker had indicated was drones were not being armed in any fashion. They are being armed. Good God. And then when they say plain view, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I was at, there was a case where cops were using infrared cameras to monitor a weed grow house. And they claimed because they had the technology to look into the home, basically, to understand how many lights were going off, the fact that, the place was 24/7 lit up. It was in the basement of the house. The cops, or in a garage area of the house, the cops could pretty well deduce it wasn't somebody with insomnia. It was pretty easy to figure out it was a weed house. They argued that was plain view because they could see it. If a drone is hovering outside your window while you're doing something that is currently illegal, such as smoking a joint, is that plain view? They will argue that it is. So, I mean, this is really the beginning, or not even the beginning, the extension of what we've been seeing the surveillance state that we're living in, and the fact that these North Dakota cops are going to have full access to arm them with rubber bullets, pepper spray. I mean, it is unreal that this is allowed to happen. And of course, they're going to say, "Oh, it's so we can look at fatalities and accidents. It's so we can, do things where we can find, we can look at landscapes and stuff like that easier, forest fires and whatnot." Sure, and I'm sure the drone would be helpful for that as well. But for a fact that's not the only thing they're going to be using drones for. The drone was created by a dude who wanted to sell them. It was for farmers. I think it was for cranberry farmers. It was totally innocent. The U.S. military approached him and was like, "Here's a bunch of cash, and what do you think about putting missiles on them?" And the dude's like, "We can do that." And boom, next thing you know, we have that as the massive war machine, the extension specifically of the Obama administration. I mean, nothing good. All technology that was created for something simplistic, something good, something that would benefit society inevitably gets corrupted by individuals with violent hearts. And there is no denying the North Dakota Police Department, all across the state, again, that has more frickin' cows than people, is going to be using this stuff for nefarious means. I mean, if they're not, I don't know how many traffic accidents need to have a drone with pepper spray hanging overhead. I guess an immense case of road rage, or maybe to wake somebody up if they're unconscious behind the wheel. Maybe that would work. So to your point, thank you so much for writing in, Brian. These people who wrote the Patriot Act, they have rationalized it. The Larry Thompsons of the world have rationalized it in their minds, so they don't. Because if he should go to sleep every single night knowing that he gutted the Bill of Rights, that he just took the Fourth Amendment and used it as tissue paper, because it is destroyed. It is somebody with a pollen allergy walking through a field and wiping their nose with the Fourth Amendment. It's all gone. So that's a great point, and thank you so much for writing in. If you get blown up, then your Fourth Amendment rights do you no good. That was do you think this is a fair assessment of what the Patriot Act has led to? And Yeah, I mean, I don't fully understand the quote, to be quite frank with you. If you get blown up, then your Fourth Amendment rights do you no good. The Fourth Amendment rights are supposed to do you good because they're not supposed to let you get blown up with an armed drone. And the protests that are going to be happening here all summer long in New York, specifically against Donald Trump and so many of his atrocious policies. They're going to be heavily monitored by drones. They're already monitored by helicopters and things like that, but they're going to be heavily monitored by drones that are going to be a lot more invasive and a lot more equipped with weapons and those sorts of things in a matter of no time. If they don't happen this summer, it'll be next summer. There's no denying the NYPD is going to be starting to do things like that under the guise of public safety, and also, which it always is. It's always under the guise of public safety, and I don't. It's really unbelievable. And you mentioned Lincoln Douglas debates. You wonder what Lincoln or Douglas would think about all this right now, huh? So it's interesting times, and I'm going to have a chance to talk possibly with David Schuster about it tomorrow, or this coming up this week, which will be very exciting. All right, well, thank you so much for writing in, Brian Kroger. All right, let's do one more. This one comes in from Grismond Sheathwhistle. Grismond Sheathwhistle, which I really, really hope is a real name, because Grismond is my favorite name of all time, and if I ever have a child, I'm going to name him Grismond. Grismond Kissel. Sounds like a strange guy to get food from, though. All right, this one is, the subject is two-party system. The email reads, Ben, love the show. Just listened to the episode that Marcus missed because he was knee-deep in Hubbard's cupboard. Yes, indeed he was. That was 4 weeks. Marcus Parks' brain will never get back. And thank you so much for all the support in our L. Ron Hubbard 4-part series of last podcast on the left. Anyway, you mentioned that you hope that a third party would emerge, and I too hope for this. I feel that people would be happier if they at least felt like their officials had their back. With multiple parties, you would still have the type of coalition caucus making that occurs within the parties, fiscal conservatives aligning with social conservatives, but at least the voter wouldn't feel betrayed like they do in the two parties we currently have. Unfortunately, this is what brings me to my email. I don't think multiple parties is realistic in any sense because of the first past the poll winner-take-all system employed in almost all districts. I'm reminded of game theory in college psych class, where it was shown that if a competition was one winner and everyone else a loser, that is a binary 100% victory or a 100% defeat, then it is unreasonable to be a third-party candidate. You would only facilitate your own demise. That is why the Dems and Republicans constantly remind us about throwing our votes away. Basically, until we make the Electoral College and congressional districts larger and allow proportional representation, two-party will be the name of the game. This leads to a question. Weren't there a couple of states that had referendum changes, changing their Electoral College votes to a proportional system? I seem to remember this, and the pundits talking about what a terrible idea this was. It was a terrible idea for the entrenched two parties since they are in control. I don't have any faith that the system will ever be changed. Do you see the possibility of proportional representation? Personally, I'd rather have proportional representation than term limits. Term limits might work itself out. For proportional representation was in the cards. Love the show. Sorry for the length of the rant. Grismond. Well, thank you so much, Grismond. You know, I did a little research on that, and I couldn't find any states that actually passed proportional representation as opposed to electoral college. Now, of course, this always comes up in elections where the person who wins the election doesn't win the popular vote. Donald Trump being the 5th U.S. president in history to win the popular vote. Rutherford B. Hayes, Benjamin Harrison, George W. Bush, and John Quincy Adams. And of course, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, John Quincy Adams also had the only other foreign-born wife and First Lady. The thing is, I am conflicted on the Electoral College because I understand the point of it. We can't have tyranny of the states with the most amount of people in them, because theoretically then you would have institutions and instances of complete and utter lack a stripping away of rights of the minority. And we have to keep in mind that we live in a nation where minority rights are a real thing and something that's needed to be taken into consideration and needed to be taken seriously. it goes back to basically the 12th Amendment. It was in 1876. There had been more than 200 serious proposals to abolish or reform the Electoral College. So this conversation, like I said, is nothing new. 1876, individuals were talking about getting rid of or reforming the Electoral College. It was the 12th Amendment that was then created, and that is why we have the current system that we have. When our country was founded, there was a lot of concern about New York and Virginia dominating. If you were from Rhode Island, this was a real concern. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier regarding smaller states versus larger states. And, we do have New York and Virginia, especially back in that time, they were huge, and they are still powerhouses, obviously, on the national scene. Of course, New York being the home of Donald Trump, and Virginia being the home of a vice presidential candidate for Hillary Clinton, Mr. Tim Kaine. So these are still very large political, sources of political power, and of course Hillary Clinton also being a senator out of New York. So we put the number in. So they put in a number of checks and balances to prevent big states from overwhelming small states. Remember, it's the United States of America. It's a federalist system. It's what makes us unique. And in order to prevent some states from overwhelming other states, they set up the mechanisms such as the Electoral College, the fact that all states get 2 representatives in the U.S. Senate, regardless of their population, and so forth. So that is your 12th Amendment. So I understand the desire for a popular vote to be the way to go. The question then is, what happens with how people campaign? Do you just completely negate the flyover countries, as they're so called? My personal favorite states: Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska. The Dakotas, although there's nothing in the Dakotas except for drones now, I guess, in North Dakota. But Kansas, those states that are often forgotten about because they are, manufacturing jobs. They are people that might not necessarily be close enough to, television entities such as what we have here in New York City with all the television news here, even Atlanta having CNN, the West Coast, specifically Los Angeles being the hotbed for entertainment globally. These Midwestern states and Southern states, Montana, they don't have a lot of people in them, and they don't get a lot of, understanding for the people that reside in those states. Their cultures aren't the cultures that permeate across the nation. And, of course, the Midwestern culture isn't necessarily the export culture that we send over by our Hollywood videos and things like that. So we do have to be very careful that, if we went to a popular vote, do you just negate Montana altogether? Do you just negate, the Dakotas altogether, Wisconsin, Michigan altogether? Certainly Hillary Clinton found a hard lesson out when it comes to their campaign strategy, which was in a strange way a popular vote campaign strategy. I think they knew full well it was still an electoral college, country. So I'm not quite sure what exactly happened with that. We'll have to ask Robbie Mook, who he's on television now. And I'm not exactly sure why anyone's taking his advice on anything any longer, because they lost the worst candidate in the history of the United States. Of course, that candidate being Donald Trump. So that is really the issue when it comes to abolishing the Electoral College and just going with the popular vote. Do we run a risk of people only campaigning in Florida, New York, Texas, California? Pretty much it. You get 60-70% of those states, you're good to go in a popular vote situation in this country, especially now as we live in a nation where everyone is sort of getting more coastal. Everyone is going to the edges. The middle of the country has sort of shrunk down in size in a lot of ways. There's sort of a sprawl to the west or the east or even the south coast in a lot of ways. So, and then of course we also have the massive issue that you got on with involving term limits, and I would also say gerrymandering, redistricting, which basically guarantees the reason I want term limits is because of gerrymandering and redistricting, because when someone is elected in a gerrymandered and redistricted district, they're basically guaranteed for life, barring a massive sex scandal or what we saw with like David Bratt beating Eric Cantor, which was an anomaly and extremely rare. And that's why it made such big news. So because of that, we already have such a destabilized democracy. And those people who live in parts of the country, again, that might not have the largest populations, in my opinion, are already struggling for proper representation. So it really could lead down a path where they get no representation on a federal level whatsoever. And is that fair? And that's what this all comes down to, is inevitably it comes down to fairness. Now, of course, you could make the argument, is it fair that we have a president in office who got 3 million less votes than someone who is sitting at home right now? And you could argue would be a far, far superior president? Not really. But at the same time, it was fair in that they were both fighting on the same field. One wasn't trying to play basketball on a football field and football on a basketball field. They were both playing on the exact same field, politicking all across the United States of America. So I understand both sides on that. And it's just, we have to be, at this point, I am still currently siding with the Electoral College as the methodology for our republic when it comes to voting on a national level. But the reforms that I would like to see happen, gerrymandering and redistricting, we need to grid it, make it a grid system based upon population and land. Don't take into account religious affiliation, race, anything like that. It just has to be a true sample of that place that is being represented by a congresswoman, congressman, because that's the only way we're actually going to get people at town halls with differing opinions. Right now, we're just living, everyone has their own echo chamber, and it's what's destabilizing the entire thing. When it comes to the third party idea, I understand what you're saying completely. Inevitably, especially with the game theory that you're referencing, the binary 100% victory versus 100% defeat, inevitably, they will form coalitions and they will form partnerships, and at the end of the day, it will come down to two people or two entities, butting heads. That's what it is. Boom. I'm telling you, I've been in this closet for an hour. I think I'm starting to go crazy. But and you look at even like Rand Paul, for example, the supposed libertarian. Holy hell. Talk about a letdown. He was the one who allowed the Obama regulation that restricted ISPs, independent service providers, internet service providers, rather, from taking your equipment, taking your information and selling it. He's a libertarian. He's supposed to stand up for individual freedom. But in his mind, the fact that the government was telling a business what to do was not libertarian. So, that's why I'm much more pragmatic than that. Even when you have somebody in there who identifies as a different party in some ways, obviously he runs as a Republican, you still have these people siding with their massive brands and completely screwing over the American people and screwing over our privacy. Between the drones, every camera on every block, and now internet service providers being able to sell our information to the highest bidder with not even giving us a kickback. I would like to see some funds coming back in my coffers, please. Again, the theme of this episode is the Fourth Amendment is absolutely out of here. It has been hit by Barry Bonds when he was fully juiced. It's going, and it's completely gone. It's quite unfortunate. At the same time, though, I do believe the duopoly of power is real. I believe that they have completely discredited third-party candidates, and they use that, you're going to throw away your vote, to discredit third-party candidates. And from that, I would say look no further than Bernie Sanders. Longest independent in Congress, longest independent senator. And obviously he did have to come in under the Democratic tent, but there is no denying he was an outsider within that party. And you could make the same case for Donald Trump, and it's just so unfortunate it took Donald Trump to hold a mirror up to this country so we could all see what's happened to the degrading morality of the people all around. And when I say morality, I'm not talking about religious right morality. I'm talking about like just overall compassion, love, empathy, and a respect for intelligence. I always say I want to be the dumbest person in every room. And, believe it or not, that's not that difficult to do. But you always want to be respectful of and try to get the most amount of intelligence possible. It's not bad. It's a good thing, And now we live in a country where it seems to be shunned and looked down upon. It's ridiculous. So I would like to see the rise of a third party, and I understand they oftentimes have to get co-opted by one of the two national parties in order to make their campaign relevant. But don't even get me going on the whole third party thing, because our nation has a lot of work to do, and I think we could go for some independent voices, which is why I'm running, of course, this year for Brooklyn Borough President. We're going to make a hard announcement on May 1st, and it'll be a lot of fun. I have to say, I'm going to be on I-24 TV, and it's going to be hosted by David Schuster. I'm starting to do more than just Fox News. It's very fun. I got a little relationship going with a great company, and so I'm going to hopefully hit up MSNBC and CNN and hell, I'll go to One American News. I don't care. We just have to get our message of freedom across. And of course, the prison industrial complex, criminal justice reform, legalization of drugs, it all ties together. That's going to be on the forefront of my mind. And the fun thing is, by every other standard, I get to be a liberal on these shows, which is nice. That's very nice. I think what happened with the Fox News is such a big brand, and I think a lot of people see the brand and then they sort of, they put, they kind of put the brand over who you are, and so that kind of happens. And of course, I have a lot of respect or I have a lot of appreciation for what they have done and how they've been able to help me out so much and everything. And I will always go on and speak my mind. I'll go anywhere. Anyway, all right. Well, I guess that'll wrap up this week's Dumpster Fire Chat. I'm going to try to do them more. We haven't traveled these 2 weeks here, so I've had a little bit more time. So I'm going to keep on doing my best to get some Dumpster Fire Chats out there to you, hopefully every other week or once a week. We'll just do our best to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening. I can't tell you enough how much I love you, and all the live shows. It's just incredible to see everybody, and everyone is so sweet and wonderful. And go out there and buy an Abe Lincoln's Top Hat T-shirt if you want to. Also, there's a Ben Kissel for President, which is kind of a fun shirt. My big ugly face is on it, which is always interesting. And we're going to do some big things. And if you're thinking about running for political office, please do, because this is what this country needs right now. We need young minds out there. Oh, hell, I don't even care if you're old. It doesn't matter. Just get out there and run for public office. Please. Just do that. And I understand it's difficult, as we had with previous Dumpster Fire Chats, with people who feel insecure. Mark Sanford is a current congressman. This was a governor who left his state of South Carolina for 2 weeks to go have an affair, I believe, in Argentina. So, you can do it. And it's going to take a few tries. I'm not pretending like, this is going to be some grand slam, easy walk in the park regarding this Brooklyn Borough presidency thing. But we're just going to go out there and give it a shot. We're going to learn from it, and it's all going to work out. Hell, we're so dang busy anyway. This is just about doing it. This is about getting out there and hopefully we can inspire other people to do it. And you all inspire me to do it, to do this at the live shows with all your kind words and stuff like that. And so thank you so much. And all right, I'm just going to throw in a hail yourselves. Why not? Because I feel like hailing you. Hail yourself. And thanks for listening. And find me on Twitter at Ben Kissel. Find Marcus Parks on Twitter at Marcus Parks. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.